now. Okay.
You're good.
Okay.
You're good.
We're here because nothing is more important than the facts. And one more issue is the ballot is stronger than the bullet. So welcome to this Point June Neighborhood Watch and Democratic Club candidate conversation. And we're here to talk about public safety and disaster preparedness. I'd like to begin by welcoming our mayor is here, Mikey Pearson, and our council member, Karen Fair, is here, and ask them if they'd like to say anything to the people who are gathering here today to witness these candidates.
I would just say thanks for everyone for being here and being part of this process. I think it means a lot to all of us. It means a lot to the city and to the candidates. And I wish the candidates all the best.
Yeah, I just want to thank Pamela and Jane and the team, David, Bill, and everybody. And just wish everybody a good forum with some good answers. Thank you.
And just to note, 2 years ago, both Karen and Mikey and Lance was at that debate, and it was much different. You know, 2 years has gone by, and it seems like the whole world, it really literally has changed. This debate will not have karaoke like we did 2 years ago, but we're hoping that every one of these candidates eventually will come together to help each other and sing at the end of this COVID period, because really it takes a village. All of us need to be on this, helping each other. Real quick, I wanted to thank the Democratic Club for all of their ability to bring this Zoom webinar to you, especially Ted Vale, who is the vice president. You're here. David Kramer, who's also our timer and extraordinaire and the treasurer of the Malibu Democratic Club. Diane Landau, Garen Gosian, who's here. Thank you, Garen. Bill Swartout, who's here. Thank you, Bill, for your help. Lou Lamont, Lance Simmons, who's the vice president. Oh, you can't hear me?
No, Lou can't. Lou could not make it today. He's out of town.
Okay, Lou's out of town. And then last but not least, the president of the Democratic Club, Jane Albrecht. You go above and beyond to serve Malibu, the community. This is your second forum and many more to come. And we're so grateful for you and all the hard work you put in. So take it away, Jane.
You're welcome. Thank you, Pam. Well, Pam, I'd also like to thank you. This forum was actually Pam's idea. And she called us up and said, do you want to co-host it? We said, sounds great. So we'd like to thank you for coming up with this idea. It's a great one. This is an important topic. And also for all the work you do and your Neighborhood Watch Group does year in, year out that doesn't get talked about. Last but not least, I'd like to thank our production team, which is Garen Kasoyan, board member Garen. Do you want to take a wave, Garen, so they know who you are? Bill Swartout, who's also one of our board members. And last but not least, Mike Thomas, former CNN producer and Kurtco media producer. And we're really lucky to have such a talented team. As I said to the attendees, if you have any technical problems, send a chat to the panel. Those are the guys that are going to help you. Last but not least, thank you for all the attendees. Thank you for coming today. We've got good attendance today. And thank you for all who submitted questions. We did read them all, and we've incorporated most, if not all of them, into our discussion today. We hope to be able to get to all of them. If you have a question that didn't get answered, you can go to our website, MalibuDemocraticClub.com. There's a page for City Council race, and under that, there's a list of the candidates and the emails, so you can ask any question you want to them directly. Now for a few technical things before we get started. As you know, this is a Zoom webinar. That means you can see us, but you're not going to be able to see yourself. It also means that you can run around your house in your bathrobe if you want, and your dogs can bark and your kids can scream, and it's no problem. If you, as I mentioned earlier, if you do get cut off, you can log back in. Another thing, many of you probably already know this since we live in this Zoom world, but at your top right corner, you can choose whether you see the speaker view or the gallery view. Speaker view will put the speaker in full view on your screen. The gallery view will put everybody like in a Hollywood Squares box, and whoever's speaking will be surrounded by a yellow highlighted view. The chat button I mentioned before, that's to submit questions or if you have technical problems. The program is being recorded, but for those of you at home as attendees, you will not be recorded. It will just be the panelists that you see on the screen recorded. We will try to get a copy of this up on our website, and if any of the candidates want it, we'll be providing it. Another thing is David Kramer, where are you? There you are. David's going to be our illustrious timer today, and he will, a lot of this is not going to be timed, the conversations won't be timed, but for the parts that are timed, he'll show a 15-second card, candidates want to watch it, and then he'll simply say, time's up when time is up. The forum today is designed to be a conversation more than a debate or a Q&A. For the candidates, each of you is running for city council right now, and in that sense, you're competitors for the next 4 weeks. At the same time, each and every one of you are caring, involved members of our community, all of whom have good ideas on how we might be able to solve some of our pressing issues. And as all Malibuites know, when it comes to fighting fires and other public safety measures, we are all in this together. And I must say, Malibu comes together like no other community I've seen when the time comes. So today we're getting you together, not so much as candidates, but as community leaders and a community brain trust. And rather than debating these issues, we'd like to make this a brainstorming session where we discuss where we are now, what we could do better, and how we could get there. For ground rules, like any brainstorming session, all ideas are welcome. Let's not slap down any ideas, let's explore them. You can make suggestions to make them better, you can suggest other things. It doesn't mean you have to agree with everything, you can ask questions, but let's keep it positive. To make this work well, I'll ask each of you to stay on topic. If you wander off topic, Pam and I will intervene to ensure this conversation stays on course. We're gonna start by calling on one of you to start the discussion. It won't necessarily be in alphabetical order. And then whoever wants to reply, raise your hand, we'll see it, and we'll ensure that everybody gets called on. If Pam or I give you a signal that it's time to wrap up, or we need to give time to another candidate, please do take that cue. Unlike Chris Wallace in the presidential debate last week, we do have a mute button, but we hope and think we won't have to use it with you all. After the conversation on a topic, there are going to be a few follow-up questions. At that time, there will be timed, and each one will have the same amount of time to answer it. And last but not least, sorry for so many technical announcements, I want to make clear that none of the questions is directed at any specific candidate or intended as criticism of our current city council members. They are simply questions that the community has and should be discussed in an election season. And now for candidate open statements. As you know, you each have 1 minute. For this, we will go in alphabetical order. The first one up is Paul Grisante. Paul?
What a benefit from having a last name that starts with G.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in this subject because part of the reason I'm here today is that I have been through many fires in the 42 years I've been here. I've lost 2 houses, so you don't want to live next door to me, maybe. And I was so upset with how Woolsey played out that I ended up getting excited enough to write 79 columns in the Malibu Times, which you can see on my website, paulformalibu2020.com. I'm hopeful that in the next fire, because there will be a next fire or the next emergency, people will have supplies in their cupboards, they will have firefighting equipment in their garages, and we will be here to support the firemen who will come. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Andy. Andy Lyon.
Hi, Andy Lyon here. Yeah, fires. I've been through every fire since I was a little kid. 1970 was the first one that gutted the house right next door to us on Malibu Road, and I've been through every single one of them since then. Stayed back almost every time. Actually, every time I have. 93, it came right behind where I lived on Carbon Beach at the time, and The one that was in Corral came very close to where I was across from Joffrey's, and now I'm across from Paradise Cove, and it came 6 feet from where I'm sitting right now. And so this is the way that everything went down. I'm interested in making sure that A, we have better communication, and B, that if you are left behind, you aren't treated like a criminal for actually saving your house and your neighbors' houses. But I believe this is also about public safety too. So I'm very concerned with the rise in crime in Malibu, the safety on the highway, the lack of sheriffs, and everything else that's going on. There's a lot of, it is public safety, correct? And so I'm very interested in bringing my ideas to what we can do with that.
Thanks, Andy.
Safer Malibu, all around.
Thanks, Andy. Rick?
I want to thank Jane and Pamela for putting on this forum. I think it's a great idea. Anytime you can get people to share ideas and brainstorm, it not only keeps the topic at the forefront of everybody's mind, but it educates everybody, and I think it builds cohesion. And I think anything we can do to enhance the cohesion of our town is very important. And just throw back the Wayback Machine to Pamela. Actually encouraged me to run for city council a long time ago and appointed me to be the public safety commissioner. And that's how I got my start in city government. So I feel like I've come full circle. And I wear 3 hats on this subject. I wear the public responder hat, as a fire captain, elected official, and I'm also a resident. And I've done all 3 of them simultaneously during the last big fire. I have my own ideas about how to improve resiliency, and I'm very open to hear what everybody else has to say. And so thank you very much. Thanks
so much, Rick. Bruce, you're up next. Bruce,
hey, everybody.
Hi.
My name is Bruce Lee Silverstein. I'm a candidate for Malibu City Council. I'm not going to talk about safety right now. I'm going to talk about that later. I just want to say right now that I've practiced law for more than 30 years, and I've worked on numerous complex matters involving multi-billion-dollar controversies. I know how to get things done. I won't take no for an answer. Instead, I'm always working to find a way to yes. That's what made me very popular with many of my clients, which included many of the largest companies in the country, if not the world. Malibu City Council has no member who's a lawyer. None of the other candidates is a lawyer. By contrast, City Council of just about every other city in Southern California and beyond has at least one member who's a lawyer. And for good reason. Lawyers are trained to craft laws, interpret laws, apply laws, and enforce laws. And that's key to safety. That's a large part of what City Council is supposed to do. I offer Malibu my 30 years of legal experience in knowing how to get things done. And I bring fresh eyes to every situation. I don't purport to be an expert in safety, but I am an expert in learning and in finding solutions. Vote for Bruce Lee Silverstein for Malibu City Council. I won't back down. And to learn more about me, visit my website, brucesilverstein.org. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Lance Simmons, you're up next.
Hi, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to engaging in civil dialogue, which is, I think, a missing ingredient to a lot of what's going on today. And we need more of it. So hopefully this will add to solving the problems rather than illuminating them. Lots of lessons to be learned from the fire, some good, some bad. But we have to do a better job the next time. And I have put forth some proposals, such as the California Fire Reserve, but I won't talk about that now. Anyway, I want to use my 40 years of public policy experience to help as we go through these difficult times, to make sure that we have the utmost coordination between different governmental agencies and amongst each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. Doug Stewart, you're up next.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks to the Democratic Club and the Neighborhood Watch on Point Doom for putting this on. This is probably one of the most important topics we can ever cover in a city. Public safety and emergency management is one of the reasons why we have a city, and it's one that when something goes wrong, everybody turns to this city and says, help me. So it's important that we manage this properly, and I like the format that you put together for this to be a discussion rather than a Q&A necessarily. As I said, I'm Doug Stewart. I'm candidate for Malibu City Council. I've got about 20 years plus here in Malibu. I'm vice chairman of the Malibu Public Safety Commission, and I've got over 2 decades of experience in business and insurance risk management. So I've seen emergency management systems up close and personal, especially in the corporate world. I graduated in 2008 from CERT. I'm currently a CERT team member, and I've taken the FEMA 100, 700 courses, the State Emergency Management System training, and I've got a general class ham radio license, which, by the way, before I ran for city council, I was able to be on the net, HF net, for the state all the time, but I haven't been able to do that lately. So thanks for having it, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks so much, Doug. Steve Uring, you're up next.
Yeah, my name is Steve Uring. I'm running for Malibu City Council. I've been in Malibu for 26 years. I'm a member of the Malibu Planning Commission. I live over on Malibu Knolls, which is the end of Malibu Canyon. So I'm used to seeing the 70-mile-an-hour Santa Ana winds come blowing through. Matter of fact, I sat here and watched Malibu Castle burn down a couple of, I guess it was 97 or whatever it was in that fire. And I'm basically running, I've spent my life trying to protect Malibu's environment and its rural character. And basically I'm running to give residents and the voters an alternative to some of the pro-development candidates that are running against me. So vote for Steve.
Great, okay, and Mark Wetton.
Hi, thanks Jane and Pamela for putting on this forum. It's a great topic and a great idea. I first came to Malibu in 1978 to go to school at Pepperdine, and that year there was a big fire up on the west end at Trancas, and it burned a couple of houses on my street. I wasn't living here then, I was down at the other end of town, but for the last 22 years, I've been in Malibu West. I have 3 grown kids. We raised them here. They attended our local schools. I was a coach and a parent volunteer from Little League to high school lacrosse. I'm a former Malibu Parks and Rec commissioner, former Malibu West Homeowner Association board member. I'm a member of the LA County Sheriff's Arson Watch, and a member of the Malibu West Volunteer Fire Brigade. And the most important thing I think to remember about fire and disaster preparedness is the most important person is you. So I'll end it there.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Well, I think all of you really demonstrated that we've all lived through fires together. And that all of you actually have been very giving members of this community. This is the first election, of course, since the Woolsey fire and the pandemic have hit. Not only did we live through the worst fire in Malibu's history less than 2 years ago, we are currently living through the worst wildfire season in California's history. For many of us, the memories of Woolsey are still very fresh. And whether right or wrong, the prevailing view of Malibu residents is that nothing has really changed. There's been a lot of talk, studies done, ink spilled, but not much actual change. And the most commonly held belief is that the Woolsey fire will only result in the next time more people staying. I can't tell you how many people have said to me, especially those who have lived through multiple fires, either you stay and fight or you lose your home. So the first question is, what has changed from the Woolsey fire and what still needs to change? What have been the lessons learned and what changes would you like to see? For this question, I'm going to kick it off with Rick Mullen, because Rick is currently on the city council and is a fire chief, as he said. So we'll start it off with Rick. Then if anyone wants to speak, just raise your hands and we'll take it from there. Rick, I know this isn't an easy question, but take a stab at it. What did change? You've been inside both the fire department and the city, and what changes would you still like to see happen?
Thank you very much, Jane, for giving me the #1 slot. I appreciate that. And you know what Mark said there at the end, very important. He said the most important person in this, I think he's talking about this topic, is you. And that is really the truth. And we have to all accept the fact that for whatever reason, we are living in a very dangerous area. And this is a very high severity fire hazard zone. And the key to resiliency really does start with the individual in preparing their home, preparing their plan, etc. So that's my personal feeling as a guy who has been a resident, has been an elected official, and has been a first responder. We just had the worst case scenario. So the less you can depend on the government, the better. However, To answer your question, what has the city done since the Woolsey fire? Let me rattle off a few things so that I can answer your question specifically.
Okay.
They've done a mass evacuation plan. They've established evacuation zones. They have a public works department has acquired 20 generators that can be deployed to traffic signals. They hired a fire safety liaison who does home hardening inspections, which are worth their weight in gold. If anybody would take the opportunity to take advantage of that, I highly recommend it. We're working on a community wildfire protection plan, which is we've applied for and received a grant to develop that. We've had Public Safety Expo. We have an annual Emergency Preparedness Month. We just had that, and we had numerous events. We have pre-season direct fire outreach. We partner with CERT, Arson Watch, VOPs to walk the neighborhoods. They just did that, and I think that's probably one of the most important things that has happened recently is actually going out and sort of shaking everybody a little bit and saying, hey, you know, what is your plan? Because a lot of people, as bad as it was, haven't necessarily taken the lessons to heart. And I think that's true for everybody in different degrees. But the more education like this and like that, walking the streets and getting out and talking with everybody, I think that's very important. They've done tabletop exercises to review the evacuation plan procedures, created a fire safety webpage. They've enhanced communication. This is probably one of the most important things. Richard Garvey from the CERT team, who's a bit of a communications geek, just established, and it's operational now, a repeater on the top of Castro Peak so that CERT team members and ultimately neighborhood readiness groups as well as city officials will have an emergency radio that works when everything else goes out. It's very important. As somebody said, communication is the key, effective communication is the key to teamwork. And we're one big team. City's also purchased a number of bullhorns, flashing light, bars, and emergency vehicle identification placards so the city staff and volunteers can alert residents during an emergency when the power's out, and they've done drills to do exactly that. They've acquired an additional 9,000 cell phone numbers for the disaster notification system, which you use during disasters and evacuations. They have disaster information stations, which are basically like six big sandwich boards that'll be put up in places so that people will be informed about what's going on. We're just about to talk about the emergency siren system, and that'll come up on the next agenda as to whether or not we will do that, but we've embraced that concept. We have a fire-resistant landscaping and maintenance ordinance adopted in 2020. We have senior preparedness, 6 senior disaster preparedness classes that have been held with 500 rolling backpack disaster kits have been distributed, and there's now capability to do a virtual emergency operations center platform. And those are just some of the things that the city has done. So a lot of the variables that were identified in the after action items from both the county and the consultant that was hired and put into place to improve what's going on. But I would like to say that I personally believe, even though all those things have been done to improve, the key to resiliency comes from the individual homeowner and family and neighborhood getting it together and having a little plan.
Is there anything the city hasn't done that you would like to see happen?
Well, I think they're starting to do it. As I said earlier, I wear 3 hats. I'm the first responder, I'm the elected official, and I'm the resident. And what you said in your lead-in, which is that I think a lot of more people are going to stay next time because that's the only way to save your house. It's not only because a lot of the people who stayed were very successful in saving their homes, but it was probably even more so a result of the law enforcement not letting everybody back in. And I can completely understand that. So we're starting to, and you know, Mikey Pearson just talked about it recently, and I'll give him a little credit for this. He's working with Chief Smith to do these firefront following groups. And although I don't necessarily agree with everything that's in it, that's probably the best approach that I've seen in terms of making the neighborhoods more durable. Because if you're, and nobody knows this better than me, if in a big disaster like Woolsey or an earthquake or anything else, you're overly reliant on a public agency to come and save you, that's probably not the best idea because everyone's going to be overwhelmed. So it's critically important that the city continue doing what it's doing. And this is a great example of it, actually, which is educating everybody about the things they can do.
Is there a timer on this?
It doesn't have to be
No one else, only Steve Urick.
Goes or someone stays. Am I done?
I think that's good. That's a good kickoff. Steve, you raised your hand. You guys have to raise your hands if you want me to call on you.
Yeah, I just, and look, and Rick has forgotten more about fires than I'm ever going to know. I just think we have to be careful about talking about people staying behind to fight the fire by themselves. I think what we saw in the last fire was there were the people that stayed behind. They were surfers. They were in shape. They ran. They were, they went outside. They had the wherewithal to do some of the stuff that they did to protect their homes. I mean, if we promote this concept of staying behind too hard, the next group that's going to stay behind are not going to have the same set of talents and experience that those folks have. And I'll tell you what, I've been through 3 fires up here. I've lived in a number of different homes. I can't think of any home that I had that's more important than my life. So I just think we got to be smart and make sure people understand that they have to look at the situation. I mean, I think, and Rick can probably talk to this more than I can, the thing that happened in Woolsey was unique. We had a big fire up north. People were drawn out. If you've got a situation where the resources are close by and there's a fire going on, you got to really think about what you want to, whether you want to stay behind, because I just don't want to see dead bodies all over the place.
Thanks. I'm going to call on Andy and then Doug. Let's focus a little bit on this issue of people staying behind and people staying behind and what should the city do? And should people be let back in after the firestorm moves through? Andy, you're next.
Well, I mean, if I hadn't stayed behind, I wouldn't be sitting at my house right now. I watched as Station 70 drove up my driveway, and I thought they were going to do something. I was on the highway looking at my house, and I was prepared. I had buckets of water up on my roof, big storage containers. I've done this before. I've stayed behind. I had hoses prepared. I had things going on, and then they turned around and they drove away. I mean, I'm not going to take a risk way up in a canyon and try and do that, but where I was able to do it. And you see now the message is, yeah, people are going to stay behind and they're going to need to be supported. But we're also seeing, all these, like Malibu West Fire Brigade and the Point Dume Bomberos, and everybody's doing it. It's sort of glamorized to become that. And that's just showing that we're not getting the help that we need. I mean, it's nice. Rick had a truck and he could go check on his house and he was safe like that. But, we can't all have a fire truck. And I think that's a big problem.
Andy, what do you think could be done to make it better?
Well, first of all, I mean, you asked before what's changed, and I don't think really a lot has. I mean, we've got these zones and everything. I mean, numbered zones are sort of, I would rather see the zones called by the name of the area instead of numbers, because not everybody is hip to where it's at on the website. I'd like it to see it's like, La Costa zone, the Point Dume zone, the Malibu West zone. It's a little bit easier if you're calling out that instead of numbers, and people are like, wait, what's 13? What's 9? I don't know, And then, we don't have all the generators that everybody's asking for up in the hills. And we don't have the pods like the Topanga fire that just came through with the guy with the trailer coming down, and those pods that are up there that were paid for by somebody to have water for the helicopters to dip into. Those should be all over the hills right now. I don't see that we're doing a lot of stuff that's going to be a big change. I mean, there's going to be a fire. There's going to be a lot of wind. It's going to be the same thing. We've got way more cars out here right now. If something was going to bust today, I mean, I don't know. I would just drove down to Santa Monica and back. If there was something happening today, it'd be a mess because there's so many people in Malibu.
Okay, everybody's going to have more than one chance to talk.
Yeah.
Doug, you were up next.
Yeah. First off, I think we've inadvertently taught people to stay behind. And I'm like Steve. I don't think everybody realizes how much of a risk they're taking. I actually had volunteer fire training when I lived in Tennessee as an Explorer Scout. And the black and white videos we had back then scared you to death. And I can't imagine what a wall of flames would do to people. And they'll probably try and leave at exactly the wrong time. And that's when people get killed. I will say from the city's point of view, I'm absolutely amazed at what we've gotten done. If you look at the 3 after action reports that were done after the Woolsey fire, they came out in August to September, November of 2019. We've accomplished a heck of a lot in 12 to 13 months. And when I took my first CERT class in 2008, we had one guy, Brad Davis, was our emergency management person. Well, we're not much better off today. We got 2.5 people, but we've accomplished a lot. And Rick rattled off a whole bunch of things. But to Andy's point, I was just up in Big Rock the other day, and they're putting the generators in for those water tanks up there right now. So we are making those kinds of steps. But I think we need to take things into 3 blocks for immediate action. First thing is we need to harden homes. And I think the ordinance that we passed about new landscaping and the Jerry Vanderbilt inspection of houses is a great first step, because a lot of times your house has got to stand on its own. The second thing is our evacuation plans. We've done, I think, a really good job of putting that in place. And some of you know that I had some real criticisms back in January when we first presented this to the Disaster Council. And those criticisms are still in place. But we have got the emergency lights working on PCH. And I know for a fact that we will be able to get those powered up to get people out on PCH if necessary. It's not there yet, but it's about to be done. The other thing we've done, KBOO's improved its ability to advise. We're not there yet on what we need for the entire city, but I'll talk about what we can do in just a moment. And repopulation issues are also a factor that we need to address. But in terms of advising people on these evacuations, this is a critical part. You've probably heard me talk about when I say the voice of God. If everyone's in their cars and trying to leave, we need to be able to talk to those people. And in the days of the Cold War, everybody had a car radio that had the CONRAD stations on it. Well, we've got the capability of doing that today with KBOO and 2 AM radio frequencies the city's got. We need to get those up and running. But my gosh, we've done a lot in 24 months or 13 months, depending on when you want to start the clock. And the part about the people that stay behind, yeah, I think a reserve force is a great idea for California Fire. And I think this Firefront following that Brent Woodworth put together in his after action report is really a good idea. But there's a lot of pieces that need to go in place. I think Mikey's on top of it with Drew Smith and Chris Frost to try and see what we can come up with to have people safe to stay behind and fight the fire that's after the fire. And that's a real key step for us.
That's interesting. I'd like to come back to those 2 ideas, the reserve and the other, but Bruce and Lance have asked to talk. Lance, I think you're next, and then Bruce after that.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think it's dangerous and unwise to basically say you're on your own. We should not be on our own. The reason we pay taxes and we have fire departments, we have police departments and everything else is to help us in times of need. Now, on the preparedness angle, it's up to us. It's up to us to prepare our homes in the best way that we can. But when it comes to fighting fires, we need to have the resources to do it in the safest way possible. And that's not getting out there with a hose and hoping you can get enough embers off of your roof. Now, I have proposed in my platform that we work with the governor's office, we work with the state, combine our resources, because resources, particularly financial resources, are going to be scarce in the coming years. And so the way to combat that, the way to deal with that, is to combine as many resources as possible. Combine the resources of the city and the county and the state and hopefully the federal government. So a fire reserve is filling a need that is blatant. We did not have enough people, professionals, to fight this fire. And we need to take care of that. And the best way to do that, I believe, is to work with the state to develop a fire reserve.
Hold on, Paul and Mark, I see you. Bruce, you're up. Lance and Doug have both talked about a fire reserve. Can someone just briefly explain a little more what that is for people who aren't familiar with it?
Yes, it would be a state program to hire upwards of about 20,000 individuals.
I've got it, I hear you.
That would be professionally trained and credentialed much like the National Guard is in protecting the peace, this would be, you would activate these people in times of need, in a time of fire. We can do this. It will primarily be funded by the state, and we need to be working with the state government and the county to get this done.
Okay, great. I think the next one up is Bruce. Bruce, you're next. Andy, I see your hand as well. So it's Bruce, Paul, Mark, and then back to Andy. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm gonna ramble a little bit because there's a lot of topics here to cover. But before I begin that, actually, the last topic, the fire reserve, I think that's an excellent idea.
Try to keep it to 2 to 3 minutes each, just so you all done. Go ahead.
Do my best. I mean, a lot of people have spoken for a long time.
Don't worry, you'll all get time.
So anyway, the fire reserve is a great idea. It's like an auxiliary fire department. It's trained fire professionals that aren't working full time until they need to, and that's a great idea. I just want to say, so during the questions, one of the words that was used was lessons learned. I mean, I remember the town meeting where Chief Osby came to tell us about the successes and lessons learned, a euphemism for failures. It was very insulting to the community, and I'll try to stay away from that term. As far as what has changed, not much did change for a while. It shocked me, actually. The fire was almost 2 years ago now, 2 years ago next month. And there's an election coming up. The election cycle began in July, and all of a sudden we're seeing all these things happening. But nothing happened for about 18 months. Why is that? What needs to happen is, Doug went through, we still need to this, we still need to that. Why do we still need to do things 2 years after the worst fire we've ever experienced? We should have all the things we needed to done. In fact, we should have had them done a year ago, because we could have had a fire last year. Now, will people stay? Unfortunately, I think a lot more people will stay, because members of city council, actually, after the fire last time, sitting up at the dais, said people will need to stay next time. That was reckless. People need to follow the civil directions. Now, it's a very difficult thing, however, because, people do leave because they expect the fire department to come and do their job. And last time the fire department came, kicked everyone out, and they needed to leave, but didn't do their job. What we need to do, and I agree with Lance on this, we need to work with the state. We need to work with the county to make sure that the next time there is a disaster, the professionals are doing their job, so the residents can be comfortable leaving their homes in the hands of the professionals who are going to take care of their property. Unless people have that confidence, they're not going to leave. And if people don't leave, there's going to be deaths. And the number one job of government is to protect the safety, health, and welfare of the citizens. One last thing, there's a lot more I could say, but one thing is, right now we need a COVID-19 safe plan for an evacuation, if there is one. Because right now, it's very unsafe to leave your home, separate and apart from any danger of a fire or an earthquake. And to the best of my knowledge, there's been no planning done, none whatsoever, for how to healthily avoid disaster right now. We're focused on a fire, but we are in the midst of an actual pandemic. Fire is hypothetical. It's lurking at all times, but we are actually dealing with a pandemic, and there's too little attention being given to that.
Oh, we're having a problem. Paul, you're up next. Thanks, Bruce. Paul, you're up next. And then Mark, Andy Lyon, and then back to Steve Euring.
Okay. I have had several different experiences over the years. In '82, I stayed in a house at the end of a mile of dirt road up above Solstice Canyon, and was able to save the house because I had 150 feet of fire hose. And an old gentleman who lived next door just said, go inside the house and hide until it's over, and then turn it on and put out anything that's on fire. It worked like a charm. In 93, we left the house because the smoke, it doesn't take a whole lot to figure out you're in the jaws of a fire. If smoke is barreling right at you and it's off to either side, you're in the middle of it. it's going to come. We left. We made the decision that that's what we would do. And fortunately for us, some firefighters from Pacoima decided to use our fire turnaround, which we had on the property, as a command center. And so we only lost a guest house on that house and and the floor of the kitchen. Unfortunately, another house that our stuff was in burned to the ground, but you know, we weren't living there anyway. And again, in 07, why did we leave? We left because...
Paul, let's do solutions. Like,
okay,
we're getting
the
into
solution,
stories.
Pamela, is to everybody who has half a brain should have a set of wildland fire gear, because you don't know. You may not, if I hadn't been called at 4 in the morning in 07, I would have been in big trouble, okay? I had time to get out, but I have wildland fire gear. I have a fire pump. I have joined the fire brigade in Malibu West. I joined CERT right after Woolsey. It's all about having the mental knowledge to be able to assist. And I do not think that as a city council person, it's up to me to tell people to stay. They shouldn't, you know, as a city council person who's responsible for the financial wherewithal of the city of Malibu, you can only say one thing: it's time for everybody to go, okay? The liability associated with telling people to stay is ridiculous, but we all are individuals who can make our own decisions.
Thanks, Paul. Mark, I agree with Pam. Let's focus on solutions.
Okay.
Or ideas you have that would make it better.
Okay, so my thought is this. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I said it all begins with you. I mean, you know, hardening your home is step number one. Everybody needs to do that. Okay, then the further away you get from your house, the less control you have over what's going on, right? So the next, after your own home, then you have your neighborhood. And so that's where the, you know, volunteer fire brigade type of setup comes in with the neighborhood, like we have in Malibu West and like they have on Point Doom and I guess in Big Rock. And I think it's a leap to say that because you have a volunteer fire brigade, then that, you know, that means that everybody should stay. And I don't believe everybody should stay. People need to know whether or not they have the wherewithal physically to stay or not, or the mental capacity. I mean, some people are you know, shouldn't stay and can't handle it. And I think these fire brigades are made up of the most able-bodied, if you will, people in the neighborhood. So I think the fire front following program has some merits. I read through it.
What is the fire front following program?
Well, this is the program that is you know, that talks about coming in after the fire and putting out the embers after the fire comes through.
Okay.
But you know, there's a group that's working on that. I think Mikey and some others are aware of that. Aware of the group that's working on that. But there, you know, that has some merit to it, which could be, you know, that stuff could be incorporated into the neighborhood stuff. As far as, you know, then you get to the neighborhood, then you get to the county, right? And so now you have county fire. That's your next level of support. Okay, so we know what happened with that in Woolsey. That, you know, very, very hit and miss for a lot of different reasons. And then after that, you get to the state. So you got these layers, and it's, like I said, the further you get from yourself, I think the less reliable the solution is going to be. So while I think it would be great to put together a state reserve, I'm not so sure that we should give up the neighborhood
I don't think
volunteers.
it doesn't have to be either or, right?
Right. So exactly. But I just think I'm just really trying to make that point that I think the further away you get from your neighborhood, the less control you have, and, you know, having less control is not good.
I think Lance and Doug, you had your hands up.
I was up. I was up.
No,
I'm up.
Jane?
But at this point, because we've got 15 minutes left, I'm going to ask everybody's had a longer time to talk, Try to make your points, but try to make them quicker. I also want to touch on sirens and brush clearance. Go ahead, Andy. We'll get to everybody else.
As far as like, you know, not having the fire trucks here the last time, they were all around. They just didn't know where to go. And I think if we're going to have some kind of a reservist, you know, instead of a Malibu West or a Point Doom or whatever, when these guys come into town, the biggest problem, it seemed, was that they didn't know where they were going in streets. So if there was going to be a thing where a bunch of guys that know what's going on, they get in the trucks with the fire trucks, and they go on the route with the guys and go, hey, you go off Porch Head. If you want to get over to here, you can go there. You go up to this street, because they didn't know. I mean, my friends lost their house right on, you know, Zumraz, right behind the fire station. In 93, my ex-in-laws, they lost their house right next to 70. They didn't know. And even though, like, Doug Stewart.
Yeah, you're right. The part of the California Fire Reserve concept is you'd have reserve station in every. I mean,
that would make way more sense, you know, to have some guys doing that. The other thing too, we're talking about reservists and having some, like the firefighting prisoners. Under that kind of concept, I'd love to see that we take some of these guys that are down maybe at the labor exchange and start training them to, you know, put them to work and helping, like, clearing trails, doing whatever it needs to do, and train them to maybe be part of the firefighting brigade, and give them some kind of purpose in that sense. Instead of, I mean, we're talking, oh, we need to hire 20,000 reservists. That's such a huge scale. We're talking about Malibu.
It's on a state level.
Yeah, I'm talking about Malibu. I'm not here to save the state. I'm here to save Malibu.
Lance, I think you're
now.
Thanks. Lance, I think you're up next.
Yeah, I will be very quick. I just want to recap. First of all, you're right. The Fire Reserve Corps will be composed of local individuals. So you will take care of that problem of people coming in from out of state or from out of the area and not knowing where to go. But here's what I want to just leave you with. You're on your own does not an effective strategy make. That is a poor, very, very poor response. And we can do better than that.
Okay.
It's a poor response to a very poor response that everybody receives. Okay. So that's...
Okay, Doug and Bruce and Rick, very quickly. Okay.
Well, let's talk about facts as opposed to, you know, gut feelings and people's
Doug, sorry to interrupt you, but I was interested in your other idea other than the reserve. You talked about the California Fire Reserve Corps, but there was another idea you had.
Well, that's the fire flood following. But let me talk about this very quickly.
Okay.
But, you know, it's easy to talk about generalities or perceptions and so forth, but let's get to the facts. I'm going to quote you from this Wednesday night's report, the annual report from the fire department to the City of Malibu Public Safety Commission. This is from Assistant Chief Drew Smith. There are a total of 4 fire stations located within the Malibu city limits, with an additional 8 fire stations in the surrounding areas of Battalion 5. On any given day, a total of 17 firefighters are on duty in the city working 24-hour shifts. Think about that, 17. A total of 51 firefighters are on duty each day throughout the battalion. Now, I remember, and this was before I actually moved here, but I believe it was the late 70s or early 80s, there was a fire that started in Agoura and burned to the ocean in 3 hours. And the time it takes to rally up the troops and get people into our town is not going to be workable to say, gee, we're going to get fire trucks in here and so forth. You're really going to be somewhat on your own. And when the city says evacuate, it's because there's nobody to come to help you. Now, the Woolsey fire was a little different. We had about 24 hours or so, but we ran out of resources. So you have to define whether or not you're talking about a quick fire, and you don't have a chance to get your resources in place, or do you have a long time to get ready? Like there's 2,000 firemen up on the Northern California fires. There's 20 fires on CAL FIRE's roster this morning in the state of California, 20 major fires. This place is saturated with fires and we're out of people. So the idea of having a California Fire Reserve probably makes some sense, but I got to tell you, if you're going to be in a fire, it's not for the faint of heart and the lightly trained.
That's
the
right.
other thing, the firefront following idea is from the Los Angeles, I forgot the name of it now. It's Los Angeles Emergency Preparation Foundation, And the idea is this would be a group of trained people that don't risk their lives. They actually vacate the premises. They come back in after the fire front has passed, get back into the houses and put out the burning embers. Most houses don't burn down from the first wall of flames. They burn down from the embers. So
What's that called, Doug?
fire front following.
Gotcha.
And it's something that's being worked on. So I just want us to think about things in the perspective of facts. And one last item I'll give to you, once again, from Wednesday night's annual report. The fire department in Malibu had 3,005 calls last year. 2,164 of those were EMT calls. And of those, 491 were advanced life support. But there were only 56 fires in Malibu last year, and only 4 of them were significant. All 4 of them were house fires, and they were relatively small.
Thanks, Doug. Bruce, I know you're up, but I'd like to give Rick a moment to respond. He hasn't talked for a while. Everybody at this point, we've got to try to be concise. I hear you. I see you, Steve.
Okay, I'm gonna be very concise. Mark is right on the mark. You got to keep it simple, and the further you get away from your neighborhood and your ability to control and coordinate with other agencies, the more complicated it gets. These things can happen very fast. It's a come as you are party. No public elected official or public safety person is going to encourage anybody or direct anybody to stay. What's important is that everybody understand what their personal plan is. And he's right. The most important thing is hardening your home. You have to make your home ability to withstand the rain of embers in your absence, and make sure that there's nothing that will catch the house on fire if that's what you're going to do. The reality is that a lot of people are going to stay for many reasons. One of them is because of law enforcement let them back in.
I've got news for you. I'm
Can't
staying.
really ignore them and just say, not arm them with the ability to understand how to keep themselves safe. No elected official is going to say, you should stay home and protect your house. When I said that if you're relying on public agencies to save you during a disaster, the point I'm making is you need to make your preparations. You need to prepare your home. You need to have your plan. What's your evacuation plan? What am I going to do if the disaster happens and we're all scattered? What's our meetup point, and how are we going to communicate with each other? That's what I mean.
I think that's good advice, Rick. I also, personally, I like the idea of the state and the city being able to do more to help us. I, for one, am planning on staying. Bruce, I'm going to let you speak very quickly. Then I want to bring up the brush clearance issue. I really want to.
I think it was Steve.
Steve.
No, it was Bruce before Steve.
Oh.
Bruce, you're muted.
I'm unmuted. Okay. I couldn't agree with Lance more, and I think Steve is of the same view. I mean, you're on your own policy can't be the policy. It is the responsibility of government to provide for the safety of the community. You know, we're hearing, I think, a lot of between the lines from some people that are saying, don't stay because we can't advise you to do that, but yeah, you really need to stay. That just cannot be the plan. The plan cannot be the citizens are on their own. The citizens have to take care of themselves.
Bruce, people are staying. Bruce, people are staying. It's not the city policy. It's a free country, and guess what? We want to, and we get to.
Yes, you do, but it cannot be the policy of the government that we're going to rely on you to stay. The government needs to find ways to help in your absence. And I think Rick was saying a little of that. I wasn't really clear exactly, but you know, things like hardening our assets, hardening the power, hardening the water flow, that is happening, for example, in Big Rock. 2 years after the fire, but it's happening in Big Rock. But it's only happening because the Big Rock residents came to city council repeatedly and made a fuss about it. It's not happening because the city took proactive action to help. It's happening because the community is insisting on it. And we need to do a better job of providing the assistance to the community, not saying you're on your own or tell us what you need and then maybe we'll help.
Okay.
Bruce, wait, Bruce, somebody asked, how are you going to pay for all that?
You have to find a way. So I'll answer that partially. We do not need to be maintaining our AAA or AA bond rating. We do not have to have a balanced budget. We can weather a financial storm and do fine in Malibu, but we are being overly conservative, overly prudent when it comes to finances. We can find the money if we have to. Spending money to save people's lives is one of the most important things the government can possibly do.
Interesting. We'll have more time after this last question I have. We'll turn it over to Pamela. But
Steve Uring.
Steve was waiting.
Andy, I know, but we can't do everything. Steve, you'll have more opportunities. The one thing the city can do, you can't do it perfectly, guys. The one thing the city can do that it's not doing and hasn't done a very good job of is really getting serious about brush clearance. We've got neighbors like that where basically you get your notice every year, but if somebody doesn't brush clear, there's really no consequence. What would you do as candidates? You know, Ventura County is quite serious. If you don't brush clear, they'll brush clear for you. There's nasty fines, if whatever. I can't believe that we're in a city that's a high fire risk city, and they don't take brush clearance that seriously. What is the view of each of you? Steve Uring, you can go first. And
hallelujah. Okay. Couple things. One, I just want to go back to this. Be careful about telling people to stay or suggest they're going to stay, but boy, just be careful because you don't want to see people die. Brush clearance. I don't know what's going on with the city. The fire department used to show up at my house once a year and take a look at my yard and the yard of all my neighbors and make sure brush clearance was done. I didn't know that program had been stopped. And so if it has, we should ask them to restart it again because that was a real good idea. And I used to get notices that said if you didn't clear your brush, somebody would come up and do it for you and they charge you some 200 or 300 or whatever the amount was to get that done. I think that's an excellent idea. But to talk about brush clearance, we also should think about the fact that we're living next to state parks. We're living next door to Joe Edmonston's Malibu, whatever, or Conservatives. They don't clear anything. They don't do anything, all right? I mean, I just got a call from the folks in Sarah Retreat next to state parks. There are brushes piled up there, and you can't get state parks to clear it. We've got to start coming up with a better relationship with those guys and make them realize that they can't provide this resource for fires next to places where we have homes because they're going to kill somebody. So I think brush clearance involves a couple of those things. I want to just talk about a couple other things very quickly. We've talked, look, I spent the week coming into this thing, looking at the city's website, reading as much as I could. There's a great article that I don't recommend the New York Times or the Malibu Times to anybody, but there's a great article on the front page that talks about what residents should do before they evacuate, you know, what they should have in place, the stuff they should do. The city's got stuff all over its website talking about how you harden your home, how you protect yourself. I think the thing the city's got to do is find a better way to promote that so people understand that stuff. The other thing is, I think the city's got to take a position that says we are going to make decisions that will enable us to protect the residents. And let me give you an idea. We just had a house come before us in the Planning Commission last week, an 11,000 square foot house.
Okay, Steve, we're going to go on to the fire. We're not talking planning commission.
Pamela, hang on. I've been waiting, okay? We had 11
fire brush related. That's the question.
Brush related, Pamela. Just listen. All right. The fact that this 11,000 square foot house on Carbon Mesa, where there used to be a 200-foot brush clear, a setback from the brush.
Steve, this is off topic. Steve, this is off topic.
This is the topic. If the city's not going to maintain the distance between brush clearance, we're going to see more houses burnt down. The city's got to take a stance and make sure we do it right. That's what I'm saying.
Thanks. Paul Grisanti, you've been waiting.
A couple things. For starters, according to Mike Brown, who's I think the PR assistant to Osby, they're still doing the brush inspections and sending out notices. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I was told. As far as the MRCA, the state parks, and the Conservancy, they all went to the state government and got themselves exempted from brush clearance requirements in 2007. And it makes no sense to me because I used to own a house that burned down right next to Conservancy property. And that's the problem. And I yield the floor.
Okay, who wants to speak next? Andy, go ahead. And Bruce?
As far as brush clearance, yeah, I mean, they came and did the burnout lot next to me. I called the owner of the property and they didn't even know that it was happening. So somebody's going out and clearing property. But on a bigger scale, when I was a kid and throughout Malibu, all through the hills, we had all the fire breaks, and that went away. And I'd like to see that we lobby to get the fire breaks, because if there is a fire, they've got all, you know, the fire department has all those big bulldozers, and they'll go up and do it in an emergency. I think we need to be proactive as a city and have those things in place. I remember, you know, riding down from the top of Tuna Canyon to the top of Big Rock on a freshly disked fire break as a kid on my Schwinn Stingray. It was a lot of fun, and they were all throughout all of Malibu. We had all these fire breaks, and that's something that Malibu should really be fighting to have again. And I don't know if it's the Coastal Commission stopped doing it or what the deal is with that, but that's something that needs to come back, because that's where our line of defense is going to be, up in the hills, where we can make a stand away from all the houses, and then maybe even like take some of the water that's, you know, being recycled from Tapia, and maybe run some you know, water up in there and get some firefighting equipment up there, tanks, what have you.
That's a good idea, Andy. Bruce,
Thank you. I have a few of them. They're common sense.
Good. Bruce.
So I completely concur.
I'm going to turn it over to Pamela, okay, for the 20 minutes of questions. Go.
So I completely concur with what Andy just said. I think controlled burns also are something that need to be explored. And again, you need to work with the state and county, because we can't just do that ourselves. But as far as brush clearance, you know, this is a matter of law, right? The law on what needs to be done, I think, first of all, needs to be clear. It's not clear to me exactly what brush clearance means. We need education, we need specificity, and if necessary, we may need amended laws to make clear what brush clearance is. And then we need to enforce it. It's just that simple. You have a law, you enforce the law. You have a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, you enforce your 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. It's a nice, clear rule. It doesn't get done, but it should. But it's a clear rule. You don't go over 55. We need to define brush clearance very clearly, and we need to enforce it. And that's, you know, the fire department can give guidance on what it means, and we need to just make that a rule. And then we absolutely need to enforce it. City might even make some money from enforcing it. But the enforcement, it's not the fact that we get the fines, it's to actually get it done.
Okay, Pam.
I have a question, quick question. In the next disaster, the emergency EOC, Emergency Operations Center for the city of Malibu, does anyone here believe it should be in Santa Monica or anywhere other than Malibu? Raise your hand. Yeah. If anyone thinks it should be outside of Malibu, raise your hand now and tell me why.
There should be a satellite outside in case we're cut off from power and things like that. Mm-hmm. But the actual emergency center should be here.
And then Doug and Steve?
It should be in those.
You're not up to speed on what they just did. Yeah, the Emergency Operations Center should be in Malibu, no question about that. We've got a nice center that's built into City Hall. There's a backup site at Lennon Park, but they've also built a provision with Oracle so that we can run the Emergency Operations Center in the cloud, so that if it actually would work better to allow us to be with the other emergency operations centers. You have to remember that, for instance, in a Woolsey fire, you've got an emergency operations center at the Sheriff's Department, you've got one at Incident Command, and then you've got one for the city. So it's all three of this pyramid, or this daisy chain of information going back and forth. And it may be that the city can't staff here in the city, so how do we get everybody together? It might be better not to try to get to Santa Monica, but to get to where we can get people in the cloud and operate. That's going to be the third backup arrangement for the city.
Okay, and Steve,
I agree with Doug. Look, if you'd love to have it in the city of Malibu, but if there are reasons why you can't, lack of power, whatever, this virtual concept is what you want to practice that, so you can make sure that works, because that may be the more likely scenario if we have another fire.
Yeah, and this is an example of what's been worked on to realize where the shortfalls were. And you have to realize too, you lose communications in the city. Well, we're on the backup repeater radios or whatever, and we've got to do a lot more for hardening some of these things or having better backup. But right now, this third option of in the cloud is where the city will probably go if we have to evacuate City Hall.
Lance?
Malibu has to be the first to fall.
Yeah, no question.
Well, if we're in the cloud, we've got to have internet, right?
Okay,
Oh,
and
hold on. You missed me a point. It's the third backup. It's the third arrangement.
Sure.
City
And
Hall
what-
is always first. City Hall with all its equipment,
right.
Community Center and City Hall is the EOC. And if you want to take it from there, you can move it to another backup site that's half operative, I think is the right word, half
Rick
operative.
and then Lance.
Yeah. So we do have the
It's
third
like with
option.
everything,
That's
you
the
want to have
fallback
plan A and then plan B and then plan C.
Right. You got it.
Got it. You know,
And
ideally, you want to have it right in the center of town, but if something comes up and you can't do that, you want to have a backup plan.
Lance.
Yeah, I think we are all in agreement that that Malibu ought to be the first to fall. I think there's.
What do you mean first to fall?
Pardon?
What do you mean first to fall?
I mean, that's the first place.
Default.
If you can do it, that's
Default.
where it ought to be.
Okay.
I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads. I think there's unanimity on this.
Well, then the question is where in Malibu?
Well,
Pepperdine never burns. They never let Pepperdine burn. So it should be a Pepperdine, right?
And that's where it was in 2007 when I was with
Or-
Chief Freeman.
Or Hughes Research. Hughes Research will never burn.
Or
They'll
how
never
about
let Hughes
how about the
burn.
county? How about the county lifeguard building at Zuma?
Right.
Well, for West, yeah, for West, they
Well-
you have to have them. It's Malibu's 20, whichever 20 you want to say, 21 or 27.
Right.
You're going to have different EOCs. You have to have one for West, one for East. You have this Central. You're not going to get people coming from the west end of town to, you have to have a couple of them maybe.
You know,
Good.
as much as it's hard to believe that City Hall itself would be in direct threat, although it could be, the parking lot at Zuma, it's inconceivable to me that you'll have smoke for some short period of time, but after the smoke clears, that area is never going to burn.
Okay.
Maybe Rick knows better. Maybe Rick can speak to that, but I can't understand how a parking lot on the beach at the ocean can burn.
It was pretty thick. The smoke coming across there was pretty radical.
Yeah.
Pretty
But people were down there
Yeah.
a lot.
My
There's
90-year-old
some-
neighbor went there.
Was it?
That's probably one of the safest places in town in terms of
Yeah, I agree.
And okay, so I think we can all agree, whoever gets elected, please don't abandon Malibu, period, in the future. Stay here as long as you can. There's trailers, the beach team trailers, you can convert those into EOCs. So I hope that's a good lesson that we learned. Number two, let's talk about evacuation.
Never have yet.
Yeah. What about the evacuation where we go just to Zuma Beach and not outside of the city of Malibu? Rick, what do you think? Why do we have to leave the city of Malibu? Why can't we go there and then come back for the fire front falling?
I think that's a great idea.
Paul?
The only problem is that Zuma Beach has a limited capacity for cars. If we drive there in our cars, eventually the lot gets full.
Very good
And
point.
so, people are going to spread out. And the wonderful thing about the whole having the regions for evacuating, with any luck, we'll be sending half the people up towards Ventura and half towards Santa Monica.
And so maybe the Ralph's parking lot is another location for the east end of town. Go ahead.
The Ralph's parking lot is a wind funnel that comes out of Malibu Canyon. I don't think you would want to be there if the fire's coming down Malibu Canyon.
Okay, Pepperdine.
Ralph's
Okay.
burnt in the last fire that came down the canyon.
Right.
Yeah. It jumped right
Steve-
over it and caught a house on Malibu Road on fire.
Right.
Doug and Bruce.
Okay, let's talk about the evacuation plan for just a moment. And this is the one the city's been promoting and it's got various places where it's documented. First off, on COVID, which Bruce brought up, the Red Cross and the city have a COVID plan. And basically it's to evacuate in your car, stay in your car, or be pushed out to distancing. The shelters will be super open, not jam-packed. It'll be a lot less people in there. People are going to stay in their cars for COVID. But the evacuation plan, that's the reason why we've got the zones. And whoever made the comment about the name, that's another good comment. From Business Roundtable last Friday, it was to put the signs up along PCH. And I think if we said, this is zone 13, you're in the Point Doom zone, is an excellent idea. So people can see them like city limit signs. Excellent outcome from this. But the plan is to get people out of harm's way. And when you start saying we're going to put people into a particular parking lot or whatever, it means people are going to start backing up. So the idea is, let's get everybody, if we have to evacuate, say, Topanga, remember, we may be affected by Topanga coming into East Malibu. We've got to get everybody out of there, headed down, hopefully to the west, tell them turn right coming out of Topanga, head toward Ventura County. And if we start getting backed up, we're going to put people in the overflow into Zuma and just keep them going. The idea is move them out, get the traffic lights, go to green, and get them out of town. So yeah, we may.
So maybe the able people who are going to have the fire gear, the pumps, everything, maybe then you can do a dolphin decal program and have them go to Zuma and then come back. So Zuma is reserved for the reserve of Malibu.
Right, you may be able to do that, but let's go back to Firefront following. Firefront following, the idea is to evacuate the place where the fire is coming. And I live in Latigo. Let's assume that Latigo is catching the fire right now, or Corral. Here comes the fire in. We need to pull the Firefront following team out. They need to go down to the beach, wait for the fire to pass through. Then we got to be able to get them back in. So that's the plan. And yes, it may be Zuma or wherever, but if Firefront following takes place, you got to move the team out of harm's way and then get them back in. And there may be fallen power poles, down power lines, whatever. We got to be able to get them back in.
That's why they need to have the supplies. So Bruce, did you go ahead?
Yes. So here's the deal. You know, you have 1,000-year storms and you don't plan for 1,000-year storms. You plan for the average storm. Woolsey was the worst we've had. Yes, we can have another one that's just as bad. We can. But even Woolsey didn't burn all of Malibu. Eastern Malibu was safe. Eastern Malibu didn't need to be evacuated, and people could have been evacuated to Eastern Malibu. You move if you have to after you start the evacuation. The point I'm making is it's dynamic. You can't figure out in advance what you're going to need to do. You need to have many plans. You can't figure out a plan to evacuate all of Malibu, and that's the default whenever we're going to have a fire. That's insane. Yeah. Because we're not going to have a fire very often, if at all, that's going to take all of Malibu. In fact, I would think, and Rick can talk about this, we're probably not going to get another major fire in Western Malibu because the fuel's been burned for the most part. We'll have a fire, but it won't be the same kind of fire we had. But we need plans for different places.
Yeah, I get that. That's a good point. Paul?
I think that the fire department has access to fire models. And based on the weather and where it starts and what has happened in the past, it will show them what the most likely path of the fire is to the ocean. And so there is more information available once you have a point of origin and a weather report. So.
And the next one might be the earthquake. So it's going to be shelter in place, right? So we all need to be ready. That's a real possibility, more likely maybe even than fire. So have supplies, get out there. You guys are the candidates, educate, empower people. We may not be able to evacuate if PCH is cut in half. I mean, I'm not saying it would be, but if there's
if it happened today, there's so many people. I drove down into Santa Monica. There are so many people on the highway right now. If there was an earthquake and we got shut, it would be, I don't even know how you'd even, it would be, forget it.
So shelter in place, everyone, get your supplies. Like, you guys are the leaders. You have to be telling all of the candidates with one unified voice, right? We all need to, I think Mark said it first, it starts with you. And so the more we can say that to everybody, to not rely on government. Yes, government's talking about it and they're coming up with some plans. Let's get back to you, the residents.
Well, Pam, I think that's important, but I also think, let's say there's an earthquake with a fire breakout. Yes, I think it is important for everybody to be prepared, but to really effectively fight fires, I think they do need support from the city and county. And I think having even what you're talking about, let's say we had an earthquake with a fire breakout at the same time and fire engines can't get in. Well, hopefully we'd have our own, but having a local firefighting plan and not just individuals sort of winging it on their own would be much better. So that's, yeah.
Mark?
Yeah, I'd like to come back to what you alluded to, Pam, about people, people are complacent and the city's got great information on the website. So if you were just to go to the website and start looking around and all the fire preparedness and disaster preparedness and all this kind of stuff is great information. But I think, people can be a little bit lazy about it, right? Did anybody catch that op-ed in the LA Times on the 27th about the Topanga fire preparedness group? Anyway, it was a good article and they talk about how they operate, and there are some interesting ideas. And the one thing that I pulled out that I thought that was great is they do like a disaster preparedness fair in Topanga. It's, you know, it's like a chili cook-off or something, right? Where they have fun stuff to do, but it's all about disaster preparedness. And they probably have all these booths.
They did that in Malibu too before, but we have two things from the audience. Goats. Annie Ellis says, why can't the city get goats to help with the fire clearance or the clearance of brush? Great idea, Annie. Two is hydrants. Can't we get permits for the pools to get hydrants so the fire department can use it? Paul.
Any pool that's permitted in Malibu in the last 10 years probably has a standpipe that's connected to the pool, so that the fire department can draw on the water in the pool without having to drop a hose into the pool. They just hook up to a standard hydrant connection.
And Doug, did you?
Unfortunately, they didn't do that above me on Upper Ramirez Mesa here, where, you know, the day after, they didn't even know, they couldn't get water, but the trucks were there and they were just putting it out with the pool afterwards. They were putting out the embers of the house with the pool that was still sitting there.
Okay, and can you all agree to goats? Annie Ellis says, can we all agree to get some goats?
Love it.
Yes.
Great.
Okay, Annie, good idea. Doug, you had your
Also, I mean, again, we could go back to like the labor exchange with guys, you know, sitting around. We could put guys to work, like doing some, you know, instead of just sitting around there doing stuff, we could actually get guys helping to do clearance. That would be a really good solution to helping guys get off, you know, get their lives back on track by working and doing stuff with the city. I've been saying that about Chrysalis coming out here. And they've been doing a lot of clearing on the side of the road. I think the city of Malibu needs to invest in getting a, you know, like a secondhand van and some tools, and they could go out and they could cut trails and they could cut, you know, swaths and do some brush clearance, and it would give these guys, you know, something to do. And hopefully, you know, the city could, instead of you know, just subsidizing the labor exchange, they could pay towards doing that, and it would go to something other than just them sitting around.
Good idea.
A good marriage of two problems.
Good idea, Andy. Rick, and then Steve.
Yeah, I just want to let everybody know the brush clearance program is still in force. Always has been. If it's not happening in your neighborhood and it's not getting done, you need to talk to your jurisdictional station captain and get them out there, because that's their responsibility.
Yeah, that's what you're talking about.
And what about MRCA? Are they still exempt, like Paul said in 2007, or are they not?
Yeah, unfortunately they are, and it's really, to me, it's shocking that the government, you know, has so much land that they're preserving, which is essentially all the fuel that we have to deal with, and they're not even required.
And I heard if you're adjacent to their property, that they make you clear their brush.
No,
well, I think in some
you have to
places
ask for
they give you the option
permission.
of doing it.
You've got to do it. They don't ask you to do it, but if you want it cleared, you got to do it yourself.
Which is better than it used to be, where they said you couldn't even do it.
Right.
Rick, what would it take to get that law changed back? I mean, it is crazy that the government's not showing the example.
It would take a lot.
It's the LA County or it's the state law? Do you know? State. Okay.
Let me suggest that we're going to have a conversation with somebody regarding the people's relationship with ESHA. I mean, I love ESHA as much as everybody else does, but I can't think of a plant that's more important than somebody's life. And
that's a great point, Steve. And you know,
we got to think about that, guys, because you know we're living close to this stuff, and we just got to. The world has changed. We've got to change with it, otherwise.
Well, all the candidates can agree to work on that together. It looks like you're all in agreement. No matter what happens after November 4th, everyone has to be on the ground to get MRCA, to get some clearance to change the laws. Paul, go ahead, and then Doug.
I was just thinking we could get some sheep and dress them up to look like deer to do the brush clearance on the state parks and the MRCA land.
Okay, who's next? Who's up? Doug?
All right. Yeah, kind of go back to the topic a minute ago. By the way, I like the deer, but the horns are going to be a little hard to do, Paul. Anyway, the idea of having like our own goat herd that went from eastern to western and just did a fire break along the city limits would be a wonderful idea. And you know, I almost think you want to ask for forgiveness rather than permission, but that's just me. relative to the comment about the fire for pools and so forth, we've looked a lot at that here in our homeowners association here in Latigo Canyon area. And Rick probably knows better than I do, but we're being told that a fire truck can't be more than 20 feet away from a pool in order to siphon the water out. And we've got a couple homes that have the pool adapter that Paul was talking about, but it needs to be tested every year. If you don't test it every year to make sure it works, it doesn't work. So it's one of those things where use it or lose it. But what we have told people to do, and we think it works, is to get your own fire pump for your pool. And just like at my house in the last fire, we left it here and had a big sign so that the fire department knew that they came up, they could run from the pool pump to the fire truck, and it puts about 150 gallons a minute in, and it allows them to refill the tank in the pump.
Okay, so would the city help with the signage? Can't we get all the signage so everyone that wants, instead of that dolphin decal, we can say where the fire, you know, like, are these city programs that we can, like Andy Lyon has a sign behind him. Maybe the residents can make their own sign. I have a pool, use my water.
Well, there
Like,
actually is a county program a few years ago for a small thing that showed pools, but it was discontinued. But I think it'd be better if we had something that told people that there's a fire pump here and you can hook into it if the fire department came to the house.
Maybe the city can supplement the dolphin decal and create another sticker that you can put on the outside of your house.
Right.
Speaking of the dolphin decal, I mean, what is the difference between having a dolphin decal and having a driver's license with a Malibu address on it?
Nothing.
Paul?
Neither work. Neither work when after a fire. You still stuck.
Driver's license is more.
So I don't understand the point then of this whole dolphin decal. If you've got if you live in the city, you got an ID that says you live in the city. What the heck are we doing with the dolphin decal? And it looks cool. It looks cool. Paul has one on the sign.
Andy, Steve, go ahead.
We've been doing dolphin decals for years and they fail every single time. And the people who are manning the roadblocks don't know what a dolphin decal is. They don't care what it is. Their orders are to turn you back. So it's nice for us. It feels like we're doing something good when we put a dolphin decal on our vehicle. But Mark's right. I mean, my license has a lot better chance of making tracks with some guy who's working a roadblock.
Andy and then Steve, go ahead.
I mean, that's the biggest problem is when you do stay back and you're stuck. I mean, even for me going across the highway over to Point Doom, every time I came back, there was a different sheriff at the bottom of the street here giving me a hard time after I'd already saved my house and that lasted for about a week of every time I left to go over to the Point Doom school to that, relief center. So as far as having like the same thing with the fire department, having people that are aware or know what's going on, we need to have like liaisons with the out of town, because the guys that came in, it was sort of scary. When I was back behind here, we had guys that showed up here. The sheriffs are all in their own pickup trucks and it was like a takedown of Malibu and everybody was gone. And it was really like, it was pretty, it didn't matter. This guy, I remember going, you're shit out of luck. I'm like, I just saved my house. How am I shit out? I mean, literally the sheriff says that to me as I'm trying to get back up to my house from Point Doom. But to be treated poorly by there should be somebody with these out of town sheriffs that are coming in to let them know what's going on with residents, to be a little bit more, what's the word?
Courtesy.
Conciliatory.
Courtesy. I mean, it's like, I was treated like a criminal and it's just, that needs to happen because we don't have a sheriff. Like when they come in and they call them all in, I know a lot of people have told me that the sheriffs that are coming in, they're out of the area, maybe San Bernardino, wherever they are, they've got a bone to pick with Malibu to begin with. Like, it's like, we're going to inconvenience Malibu because, you're just a bunch of rich pricks anyways, right? I mean, that's what the perception is.
So
it would be nice to have guys that are there, just like to show the fire department where to go. This is the road to get up to, Zuma View or these are the people. We need something like that to help.
Andy,
help Malibu
if you were elected, you, instead of the dolphin decal program, replace that with like a CERT training so you can get an ID that the sheriff, whoever's elected, Rick, tell me if I'm wrong, can work with the sheriff department and say you've been trained, you've been vetted, and you're allowed to travel. So you have an ID that will show whatever it's CHP from San Francisco, from San Diego.
You know what people were using? They were going home and they were photoshopping and they were making their own press passes and they were going to Kinko's and they were laminating their. But yeah, if you could have something that people recognize, that would be really helpful because
3 of you who are elected can create that program.
I'm all for that because
it's already out there.
So what is it then?
Well, what we
Arson Watch?
Yep, we have an ID from the sheriff department. That's the Arson Watch ID. It's got a little badge and it's got your picture on it and everything, and that works well. But I don't know how
the CERT guys weren't even allowed to get in.
Right.
Correct.
Is the idea with these IDs is that
Rebo made it in.
Get back in even when there's an evacuation order in place?
Right, you'd have training and
yeah.
Yes.
Bruce, go ahead, and then Rick,
so,
tell me what you think.
Right. The way I see it is the issue should not be what are the exceptions to the evacuation. The issue should be what should the evacuation be. The evacuation needs to be more reasonable. We need to be working as a government unit with whoever is calling the shots to get them to be more reasonable when there's an evacuation. For example, take the Woolsey fire, which we're talking about before. Maybe it was reasonable to initially evacuate everybody, but within 24 to 48 hours, it became very obvious that most of Eastern Malibu didn't need to be evacuated. And they certainly didn't need to be evacuated for a week. So we need to be able to work with the powers that be if we're not those powers. And, one thing I was pretty upset with last time is if the powers that be won't help, go to the press. Go get them shamed into doing what's right, because our people who live here shouldn't have to be acting like criminals to get to their safe homes. It's different if your house is in a fire zone and a blazing fire is occurring. But once the fire is out, we should be able to get back home. And it's not some people should get back home. I don't agree with this, that only certain people should be able to get back home. Either everybody is able to get back home or no one is, but the evacuation itself needs to be tailored to the situation.
Okay, we have about 30 minutes left and we haven't even got to public safety. So do we want to do a round robin real quick with any other ideas that you have for this to close this out? Jane, do you want to have any further questions for?
No, I'm fine. I think this conversation is really interesting. We let it go on longer than originally scheduled because it was really touching on issues that affect a lot of people. So Pam, the public safety issue is yours, so I'll let you do what you want with it.
Okay, so public safety, I'm gonna urge everyone, there's so much to do for you guys who are running, to give us I'm gonna do this, what we just discussed, so we can mull it over further, because it's so important. We didn't finish it, but we have public safety now, and we have 30 minutes left. So we need to get to that right now. As you know,
I think we should wrap, unless we're going to discuss fire further, I think we should just wrap up the fire discussion. It's been a great discussion.
Yeah.
And then let's just move on to public safety. Clearly we could use more time on it, but we've covered a lot of territory.
Yeah, and I did in the comments, we said some of the things, rename the evacuation zones from numbers to name areas, landscaping, harden your home. Jerry, the fire liaison, will come out to your house to tell you what you need to do. Everyone call City Hall and get Jerry out there. The California Fire Following and Reserves, people need to learn more. We can train people to vacate and then help out the embers after the fire. 3 of you, when you're elected, hopefully you will get on that program and help make sure it's implemented. If you're gonna stay here, you get your wildland fire gear, be prepared, get your pumps, get your generators. Nobody's gonna save you, you have to save yourself. I think that kind of wrapped it up. Anything else?
Steve wants to say something.
Steve.
Somebody better go talk to the sheriff, because the last conversation I had with the sheriff said when there's a fire, he's not going to let people back in. And rules are made for ease of enforcement. So what happens is whenever these new firemen or new sheriffs come in, They just follow the rule that says you can't get in. So somebody needs to sit down with that organization and figure out a plan, because right now we don't have one.
Well, I think you can all agree, if you're elected, you'll all do that, right? Anyone else want to raise your hand? Any other ideas?
I think the real question is, you know, how long they keep us out. For example, if the fire threat is gone, but there's no electricity, could they not let us back? For people who are willing to, maybe you have to sign a release, you know, before the fire with City Hall. But if people are willing to live without their electricity or water, whatever, I don't see any really reason why they shouldn't be allowed back home. But that's a question of how you decide it.
They kept us out.
You don't get evacuated because the electricity's out. You shouldn't have to stay evacuated because the electricity's out.
They kept us out last time because electrical lines were down, because there was a danger for. I'm just saying that we got to talk to the sheriff. The sheriff basically has been fairly straightforward, saying, guys, when the fire comes in, you're not going to get back in. So somebody better start talking to him real quick, because, you know, they're going to lock it down and you're not going to get back in.
And Paul, go ahead. You have your hand up.
I just want to say that as a city council person, we're never going to be in the position of telling people you can stay. You know, that is something that people are going to decide on their own. We're never going to be in a lawsuit where somebody is talking about their loved one who was lost, and it was the city's fault for telling them he could stay.
Right.
You know, if people
we should have a say though when it comes to when we can get back in as a city.
One of the comments says that LA County Fire Captain calls the shots. He tells the sheriff and everyone else, including Reba, what can be done and can't. I don't know if that's true.
Tell that to the sheriff.
You're shaking your head.
Rick, we were told that the fire department really calls the shots in terms of when the evacuation order gets lifted. Isn't that correct?
No, it's a unified command, and it depends on how big the event is. The sheriff used to be in command in disasters in LA County, and I believe the Board of Supervisors took that away from him, and it's now the Chief of Staff or the Board of Supervisors. But, you know, like using Woolsey as an example, that was a state-run event. It was humongous. So it was a CAL FIRE guy who was an incident commander who was making the shots on that. Depends on how big the event is. If it's smaller in scale, then, you know, the person in charge is probably a little more malleable, put it that way.
What can you do as an elected mayor or our city council people to make sure you're communicating the wants and needs of the residents to get back in? What can you do?
Well, what we did was we've had a representative at the command post, and we were in on all the briefings every day, and was our position. That was my position the day after the fire. I want everybody back in because I knew that houses still can burn down the second and third day. And the whole looters thing to me is the residents are going to know who should be there and who shouldn't be there. I think as long as they're not getting in the way of the infrastructure replacement people like the telephone pole people, etc., it shouldn't be a problem. I'm a big proponent of get people back in as quickly as possible. And but in this case, it was a big event. They're like, yeah, you're noted, but no, negative. Now, I will say that we were much more successful in getting people in quicker than the County of Los Angeles, where my station is, because we had those soft closures and hard closures, and we moved it back as the thing went on. So we were able to have a little more sway than in the county, where it's just a hard no period, 45 days, nobody can get in or out, and they're really hardcore about it. So it's doable, but it's difficult. And, you know, the sheriff, right after he got elected, which was essentially concurrent with the fire, came out here and he had a big public presentation at Duke's, and he listened to, you know, 2 or 3 hours of people bellyaching about exactly this. And his closing statement was, and I'll paraphrase, hey, when we got a big event, we got to keep it simple. When we tell you to get out, get out.
Right.
We're not going to let you back in because we got big things to do, like put back power poles, etc. But if you stay, that's fine. You've got to provision yourself and make sure that you can feed yourself for 2 or 3 weeks, because we're not going to be catering to bringing supplies in, etc. So that's his position, and that's what we have to deal with. That's the most difficult part of the equation, I would say, because we can smooth it out ahead of time, but different faces show up when it's a big event like that.
Okay.
We were all let down. Everybody up here was let down. because we weren't able to get food. We weren't able to get anything up here. And that's the big, but people were, I know that people told me they had film crews on their houses filming their burned out house, but they weren't able to come up.
Yeah.
And they weren't able to go down to Ralph's, which was open, because they couldn't get past the roadblock.
Andy,
No, this is not unique to Malibu. This stuff happens
No,
all
I
I
understand that,
just
but
out
that's
on the-
unacceptable.
Lance,
And that's why
I see you,
I was
Lance.
just out on the Bobcat fire for a week. Same thing, you know. All
Lance,
the people
what
that-
did you have to say before you get up, and then Bruce, and then we're going to go to public safety because.
Yeah, just to wrap up, it sounds to me like what you're saying, Rick, is that the current process, and we should really be talking about process here rather than anecdotes. The current process of having a representative in the emergency command center doesn't work.
I didn't say that. I said it worked better for us
That's
than
what
it
it
did for the
sounded like
command.
you said.
But I
It
said
sounded
that
like you said
we're not in command.
you made a recommendation as a representative of the city of Malibu to let us in quicker, and that it was discarded. That you were told that basically your opinion didn't matter.
I would say that that is true. We didn't get in.
Okay, then the process isn't working
A
then.
little better than
Then the process doesn't work, and we need a new process.
I forget, who was mayor pro tem during Woolsey? Anybody? Bueller?
Paul,
Bueller?
let's talk about the future, not the
Well,
past.
I'm just saying because we didn't have any, if we didn't have a point person because Rick was busy on the fire, we didn't have an actual mayor.
I'm gonna
the bottom line
Okay.
is, the
20
bottom
minutes
line is,
left if we're gonna touch on the public safety.
Okay,
We're
let's
gonna-
go to public safety. We're going to have to continue.
Sheriff, speaking of the sheriff, we spend $8 million a year for sheriff protection. Are we getting our money's worth?
And a lot of people perceive crime as increasing. We just had a kidnapping. We've had multiple break-ins.
it's not a
So-
perception. It's not a perception.
It's not a perception at all.
No.
It's a fact. If you want to
What
talk
are
facts,
you
it's a
going
fact.
to do to get more police support here in Malibu for residential neighbors and for the weekends in particular? What are you going to do? Paul, go ahead.
I think all of the cars, the deputies' cars are equipped with GPS tracking, I believe. And it would be interesting to see an audit that shows where our deputies are when they're on our clock and we're paying them. How much of their time are they actually outside the city limits up in Corral Canyon or Latigo or on Canaan or on Decker, as opposed to being here where the people who are paying them are hopefully being protected. And
Okay, an audit.
and it would be a simple accounting measure for us to be compensated for that. And it's not 8 million, it's 8.6 actually goes to the sheriffs. And by the time you throw in the other stuff, it's closer to 910, something like that.
Okay.
We
Anyone
need
else?
more protection. We don't have any, everybody knows, it's total common knowledge that we only have 2 sheriff's cars at night in Malibu.
Correct.
Everybody knows that. It's fair game. Malibu is just sitting ducks right now. And if anybody doesn't think that's the case, then their head's in the sand. So we need to pony up some more money for that. And that means getting rid of an assistant city manager or whatever. I don't know. I think that we have money. We can afford it. We can't afford not to have more sheriffs out here. Right now, with everything that's going on, if you go down in Santa Monica and you see the crime that's going on down there and you see it's walking up from Santa Monica, we are just whistling in the dark if we think it's not going to come up here and hit us. I have friends that have gotten their, now it's the catalytic converters are getting cut off their cars. There's break-ins. We have a public safety guy, but we're not getting like their true reports of what's actually going on here. I don't see these weekly reports of crimes. I know it doesn't fit into the Malibu Way of Life license plate, but it's a reality and we have to face it and we're going to have to take it on. And that means throwing money at it. We cannot like sit back and let this happen.
Okay. How much money would you, Andy, how much more money are you talking about? And then it will go to Doug and then Bruce, you'd raised your hand.
I mean,
And Steve and Mark, sorry. Go ahead.
I
How
know,
much more money are you going to allocate?
you know what, they're every week it seems like they're paying for consultants for something, $250,000 to tell us what we want to do with the lots that we just purchased, or I saw they pushed 500,000 for homelessness. All this stuff that, there's money there. I don't know how much, a million, who knows? I don't know. Some of the other stuff needs to be taken, the brunt needs to be taken from the COG, whether it's, patrolling Zuma. We need to get the state parks to take care of their areas in Malibu. We don't have to foot the bill for everything.
Andy, thank you. Doug, you're next. Bruce, Steve, and Lance, go ahead.
Okay, well,
Trying to get everybody. What are you going to do about police presence or sheriff presence here?
okay, one of the things I always say is perception becomes reality, especially if you hear it often enough. But let's talk about things objectively. Once again, the Public Safety Commission, I'm just going to put the facts on the table from what the Public Safety Commission sees. This is the year-to-date numbers. Crime stats year-to-date. There's 7 rapes this year versus 2 last year. But when you talk to the Sheriff's Department, those are centered in the drug rehab facilities. When you look at robberies, there's 18.
What does that matter?
Right? There's 18 robberies this year versus 10 last year. Residential burglaries, 33 against 25. Locked vehicles.
That's an increase. That's an increase in residential. And we just had an attempted kidnapping. That's a fact 2 weeks ago. It's not going to be on that report. What are you going to do, Doug? I don't want to hear the numbers.
Well, let's talk
What are
about,
you gonna do?
if you look at the actual crime numbers, they're down at 12% when you go through all of them.
But we had an attempted kidnapping last weekend. So
Hold on.
what are you going to do with the police?
You're saying crime is down?
Crime is down?
Let Doug finish his numbers. The numbers so far tells me it's up, but go ahead, finish
Yeah.
your numbers, Doug.
What I'm trying to explain to you is, let's talk about things objectively. The part that's down are car break-ins. But when you look at the part 1 crimes, yeah, we've got some serious issues here. But when you go back and look at the people that have committed the crimes that have been arrested, 3 out of the 4 arrests are for transients, Malibu transients. And we also have issues with people not obeying our traffic laws and carrying and doing what I'll call minor crimes. So we have 2 issues here. First thing we need to do is to get our traffic laws more enforced so people aren't driving hell-bent for leather down PCH. And that probably says take some of the patrol cars during the day and turn them into motorcycle cars. It's a little cheaper. Same thing is true for traffic enforcement. You can get a lot of the traffic enforcement fines to pay for the increased civilian service oversight. Now, when you look at the responses that we've had and the crimes that we've had, yeah, they're somewhat up, but there's a direct correlation to the homeless situation, and we need to get the homeless situation solved. This incident with Montana is more than likely a mentally ill person that probably is a homeless person. I don't know that for a fact, but that's probably the case. And it's true when we look at the rape attempt that was by Pepperdine a few months ago. Once again, a homeless person. So we've got to deal with issues on several fronts. More CHP, we need that. We need to get more traffic enforcement, and then we need to get the patrol cars to be as active as we can be. And Paul's right, there needs to be audits on when they're here.
Okay. Go ahead, Steve and Bruce.
Yeah, Doug, I'm just, really, 1, crime is up. And 2, I'm sort of disappointed that the Public Safety Commission has, look, the homeless population in Malibu is going to increase, right? I mean, as soon as this moratorium on rental is lifted, everybody predicts it's going to come up. We have not seen a plan from the Public Safety Commission that says, guys, here's how we handle this. And I agree with Andy. We got to put more people, there's a couple things. We got to put more police on the street. I think we got to take a look at some of these, our VOPs, and see if we can't give them more responsibility. We've got the sheriff looking at traffic. We got them looking at homeless. We got them looking at short-term rentals. We got them looking at increased crime. We got them spread so thin, they're not going to do a good job on all those things. We got to find better, really focus our resources better on some of those problems. I don't know why you've got this IPS group, these local enforcement groups. I'll tell you what, I mean, at least around my neighborhood in Sarah Canyon, they are superb. They show up every day. They stop in front of the places. People love them. Why can't we use them to maybe help us deal with some of this rising crime issue? Why don't we take the VOPs and give them more responsibility? Right now, they can't get a car towed, right? We got to bring a sheriff in if they're not a way that we can figure out that they have the ability to call in the tow truck. So we got the sheriff doing the stuff they're best at doing, which is traffic control and some of the crime. And we've got some of these other potential groups doing something to help us deal with some of those other issues. And Pamela, I'll tell you, if I were you, I would find a little group up in Point Dume who thinks they want to do that, and I'd run a little pilot program. I would get them together with one of these home, you know, the IPS or the Malibu Patrol, whatever it is, figure out a program and start doing that, and let's see how it works. Because if you can one little pilot and see that it works, maybe then we can spread it out to the rest of the city. If we wait to do this across the board, we'll never get there. That's all.
Bruce,
Can I
and then
just-
I'm going to give people who haven't spoke on this. Go ahead.
I'd just like to respond for just a second because it's a direct query back to me.
It's not how it works.
He writes,
No,
Let's
Bruce.
wait until everybody,
Bruce, sorry.
and Doug, just pin that, and then we'll come back to you.
All right.
It's Bruce, and then Lance, Paul, and Mark, and Rick. You didn't talk yet.
So I actually agree with a little bit of what everyone is saying. I think there's a multi-step thing here. Paul and I don't agree on much, but we do agree on this. The fact that crime is up doesn't mean we're not getting what we're paying for. We're either getting what we're paying for based on an audit and other objective measures of what we contract for and what we receive, or we're not. We might be not contracting for enough, or we may not be getting what we're contracting for. That's the first thing that has to be resolved. Absolutely. We need to know whether we're getting what we pay for. If we're not getting what we pay for, if we're not getting what we pay for, we need to find a way to get what we pay for. And it's not get our money back, it's get what we pay for. And if we're getting what we pay for, then as Andy says, and Steve says, I think, we need to pay for more, because we can't just make crime go away by providing inadequate protection. We need to have the protection that we do, that the circumstances warrant. Now, it may not be the sheriff alone. Other people have said it may be private security. I don't know what the law is in terms of a city contracting for private security. That needs to be investigated. I don't know whether that's more expensive or less expensive than working with the county. That needs to be investigated. I understand also that we get a certain percentage of property tax, and that's based on circumstances that existed 20 years ago. We need to re-examine the circumstances and see whether we're entitled to, under some formula, a greater percentage of property tax to take care of this. So there's all kinds of things we can be doing, and we need to find other ways to get revenue so that we can use that money to protect our citizens. Again, I said it before, I'll say it again. The protection of the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens is the #1 responsibility of government. Everything else is important, but that's the #1 responsibility, and we have to deliver.
Thank you. Now, who didn't speak yet? Lance and Mark and Rick.
In order to have an appropriate solution, you have to know what the problem is. And I am not convinced from this discussion that we've identified what the problem is. Is crime a problem or not? Is there unanimity here that crime is going up? Because I thought I was hearing something different from the presentation of the numbers. So I'd like to know if does everyone on this panel agree that crime is going up and is a problem that needs to be addressed? Is there anybody who doesn't agree?
Anyone think crime is going down? Raise your hand. Does anyone think crime is the same? Raise your hand. Does anyone think crime is going up? Raise your hand. So it looks to me like everyone thinks crime is going up.
Okay, so now we've identified the problem. If crime is going up and crime is the problem, then it is our responsibility, it's our duty as elected officials, if we get elected to city council, to deal with the problem. And the way to deal with the problem is, you know, a wise man once told me, you can tell a man's priorities by looking at his checkbook. So if this is a priority, then we need to spend whatever it takes to deal with the issue. And I know that the issue is complicated. And I think that you do have to separate the issues of, I live on PCH, the issues of scofflaws on PCH versus the issues of bodily harm, or home invasion, or burglaries, or robberies. And so you have to fashion the solution to the problem. And if this is the problem, then we all ought to be in agreement that we need to put our money where our mouths are to deal with it.
Okay. So you're saying to put more money towards it.
If that's the problem, then the solution is to invest more in something that'll help alleviate the problem.
Okay. So we still didn't hear from you, Rick and Mark.
This
Mark,
is
you wanna go?
Who's made a good point?
Go ahead, Rick.
problem all over California. I was
Right.
on public safety committee for the League of California Cities, and it's been getting worse every year. It's primarily a function of the fact that they let people out, a lot more people out of prison, and they're reducing the prison population. And they've also laws like if you steal less than $950, they're not going to put you in jail, and they'll just let you out. So that's kind of the way the graph is going. That doesn't mean that that we can't deal with it. And I think some of the things that were mentioned here have value, like the increased participation of the VOPs and things that are appropriate for them, as well as an analysis of how much bang we're getting for the buck from the Sheriff's Department. It's a big area. It's a big area to cover, and it's not just 13,000 people. It's maybe freaking 100,000 people on the weekend. So it's a very strange equation that we have here in Malibu, and but I think we need to look at everything.
Mark?
Yeah, I would be curious to know, I mean, we all know that the population has increased since COVID. There's more people out here all the time. The highway is busier. There's more transients and so forth. And from Doug's numbers, it looks like a lot of the crime is being caused by transients. So that begs the question, is some of this temporary? And when COVID goes away, whenever that happens to be, will we have will things go back down to a level where they were before? And that's not to say there wasn't too much crime and not enough enforcement before. I think there was, and I also like Steve's idea of the private, looking at the private security issue, and maybe negotiating with one of these companies on a citywide basis to bang down the price of it, because it's all about money at the end of the day. Are we going to spend money for the sheriffs, or are we going to get more bang for our buck if we use private security?
Well, Bruce did a good job of helping negotiate the law firm rates down, and I do think there's power if the city can take that on in a task force. But let's go to negotiate together for all of Malibu, not just one neighborhood. Paul, Andy, and then Steve.
Andy was before me. I'm sorry.
Okay, Andy, sorry.
Well, I to go back to like IPS, just because you just mentioned that, I talked to a friend of mine, and she told me that they can't hire enough guys because of the lack of response from the sheriffs, right? And so, that's basically like it goes back to the fire thing. It's like, well, they're not going to show up for you, so you better stay behind. So now everybody's going to IPS, and we don't know what's going on with that. Why is that money? It's really frustrating when people feel like they've got to double pay to get protection. And why is it? The other thing too is that now we don't have a substation going. We don't have CHP. Why are we not going full force into getting that substation out here in Malibu? People want it. They don't want to hear about, at the business roundtable a couple of weeks ago, or not this last one, but the one before, where Reva said, well, there's cars at Lost Hills at night. So that's an extra 30 minutes that we're paying for every time they come over. And that doesn't do anybody any good. And so now we're getting, IPS is hiring up guys like
What about
as they can.
What
And
about
then
our
same
own
with
police
CHP.
force? Maybe
What's
if the sheriff can't do a substation here, maybe it's time to reevaluate. I know Santa Monica, it's a much bigger city, but maybe it's a part of the 8 million goes for a private and part goes to the sheriff.
Well, yeah, I mean, and then too, because everybody, I mean, I was saying this in 2012 when I ran then, everybody was like, you know, we pay for them, but what do we get? We get the guy at the bottom of the hill at Ralph's, and everybody's just like, oh, that dude on the motorcycle. That's what we're paying for him to sit there and just pick people off. We're not getting, you know, at night, are we talking about crime? And then we're also talking about, you know, the speed racers that are coming through town at night. I mean, it's like a, you know, the Autobahn on PCH at night. So we don't have people looking, you know, they could just jump in, rob somebody and get on the highway and oh, it's okay. They're just racing. You know, we don't know there's so much going on and we're so underprotected. We need to have a substation. We shouldn't have to rely on cops coming from, the sheriffs coming from over there. We shouldn't have to rely on IPS. I mean, it's great that they're there. You know, what are we going to do? We're going to start a guardian angels again. I mean,
we have 5 minutes to go. Somebody in the audience just said, why not ask IPS what would cost for a contract for the city? Do we have to keep the sheriff? Who was next? Steve and then Paul? Is that the order?
It wasn't IPS. I had a conversation. The guy who runs Malibu Patrol, I don't know what the hell his name is, called me the other
Wagon Seller.
Okay.
Scott Wagon Seller.
Okay. I mean, the deal was, because what we got the sheriffs doing now is also doing short-term rental complaints on weekends. All right. And they don't do a good job there. So he was saying, look, we can do that. Right. I mean, so some of these other, if we get smart and I take the people with the talents and assign them to the problems they're best able to solve, we may have a solution for this kind of stuff. And I don't know who was saying that, you know, home first. Okay, and we better figure out a solution, because that thing, I just had a conversation with somebody the other day whose housekeeper rides the bus from Santa Monica, and they're getting afraid to ride the bus because the bus is full of homeless people that are coming into Malibu to get food. So this problem is not going to go away unless we do something.
Okay, Paul, Bruce, and then Doug.
Part of our problem is we have a broken windows problem. If we don't fix the windows, the visible stuff, when guys are driving out here thinking of doing evil, they figure, I don't see any police. Nobody is stopping people. The guy next to me is blasting his music and he has no mufflers on his vehicle. Obviously, the cops don't give a damn about this place. This is where I want to come and make some money, because I am nearly homeless because I have no income. And Steve is right, and Doug and I have talked about this. Every real estate blog around the country is talking about the numbers of people that are going to, when there's no longer a freeze on evictions and forbearances, and people are actually, the landlords are actually able to take back their properties, there's going to be a big jump in the number of homeless people. And those people are going to be desperate. They're going to need to do something to support their kids. And here we are.
And it's not just the homeless, but as the economy goes bad, and it's bad, crime in general goes up because people are in difficult.
Burglaries are up.
Well, the economy is bad now because of COVID. And when they take off the COVID restrictions, a lot of these people are going to discover that while they had forbearance and everything, now they owe the money, or they are due to make double or triple rent payments. They're going to walk, and they're not going to be able to get into the next house because they've just screwed their credit.
Okay, Bruce and Doug, what are you going to do?
So look, I want to talk about the homeless situation a little bit. There are many different reasons why people are homeless. And for the most part, people don't just become criminals because they're homeless.
No.
There are many good citizens, residents that fall on hard times and become homeless, and we're going to be seeing a lot of them. And they need whatever compassionate help can be provided. Then there are people, and I'm not suggesting that they're not entitled to compassion and are caring as well, but there are the drug addicts. There are people who are mentally ill. That is where most of the homeless crime is coming from. And I don't mean to sound like a broken record. I've talked about this before. I'm going to talk about it again. Martin versus Boise, which we hear over and over and over and over again from the government as the reason why we can't do anything about the homeless situation. It's not true. Not only is it not true based on the decision that exists already, but as everyone knows who's following national politics, our courts are getting more and more conservative every day. The Ninth Circuit that exists today is not the same Ninth Circuit that existed that decided Martin versus Boise. The Supreme Court is changing. there is not going to be a pendulum that continues to swing towards government can't protect the citizens. Government can. And we need to find the things that we can do under that decision, which is the most expansive decision that exists, and it's a limited decision. We need to find what we can do. We need to find the solutions that we can use under that decision, and we need to start utilizing them. And that goes to the RVs that are all over the PCH also, which isn't even a homeless situation. It's just people taking advantage of us by parking their $100,000 RVs on the highway. So there's a lot we can be doing, but you can't just blame it on all the homeless. I mean, there are battered women. There are people who have lost their jobs. They're not just becoming criminals. We need to be distinguished between who we're dealing with here.
I think it's also wrong to think that all this increased crime is coming from the homeless. There are a ton of criminal gangs in Los Angeles, in Oxnard, and they do come and attack homes and things. And by the way, their life wasn't good during the lockdown either, because everybody was home. It was harder to burglar homes. So yeah, I think to blame the crime situation, the serious crime situation, on the homeless is not factually probably accurate.
Okay, we're
No,
going
but knowing there's only 2 sheriff's cars in Malibu at night doesn't help the situation.
I agree with you, Andy. I think that's right.
And that's on every Facebook group in Malibu.
Especially professional criminals know where they can get away with the crime. No question.
Yeah.
Can I get my 2 cents in here?
Sure.
I want to come back to where I was kind of cut off before. I agree with Bruce. By the way, the homeless situation usually goes into three categories. Those people that need a hand up, those that have a mental illness issue, and those that have an addiction issue. And there's a different agenda for each one. And no, I'm not saying everything is a homeless transient problem, but you're going to have an issue with the homeless and transient types until we solve that problem. Now, the question on the table is, how are you going to make things better? Well, you know, there's really not one just sheriff's patrol car. It's not that, that's not the only thing. It's not, and it's one of my old bosses used to say, different horses for different courses. VOPs by law are restricted as to how far they can go, and towing cars is one of the bright lines they can't do. But as what's called a CSO from the Sheriff's Department costs 1/3 of what a patrol car costs. And they can do all the traffic enforcement except for writing a speeding ticket that any patrol car can do. So if we want to take, say, 1 patrol car off the daily shift and have 3 CSOs, now you've got more police presence for the same cost. It's this different horses for different courses. Same thing is true for motorcycle officers enforcing traffic laws. These guys in patrol cars, unfortunately, have a bias. They want to fight crime. But when you get them on a motorcycle or they're in a CSO car or a VOP, it makes a difference. And I'll give you a number just so you can see how this happens along exactly what Paul was talking about, the broken windows theory, which if you show unlawful activity is not prohibited, then you'll get this escalation. Chief Bratton, or Police Commissioner Bratton, started this in New York. Let me tell you, this last year, so far this year, we've written 24,680 traffic tickets versus last year we wrote 17,977. So yeah, we're enforcing more tickets because we've had more CSOs, and we're starting to trade or getting them in here on a supplemental basis from Sheila Kuehl's office. So we know how to get more police presence that's cheaper, and you want to have the right police presence to match the crime issue. And to go back to what Lance was saying, you got to know what the problem is. Yeah, we need to match the resources against the problem we're having.
Well, at this point, I don't know about all the panelists and all the attendees, but I found it really interesting, and I think the conversation worked really well. I congratulate you on all of that. I hope you enjoyed that format. But at this point, as one of my great professors said, the mind can only absorb what the derriere can tolerate. As another great speaker said, there's 3 words that have thrilled audiences forever, and that is, and in conclusion. So I think at this point, there'll be more forums. If everybody wants to find out what they are, go to the Malibu Democratic Club website. It's on our calendars. And Pam, do you want to officially close our?
Yeah, and I just want to thank each and every one of you who were here today. I apologize that it wasn't timed per se. I hope you found it to be rewarding. And for the people at home who were watching and asking questions, it is going to take every single one of us working together after November 3rd. Whoever isn't elected, I hope you'll still continue to help. and we need you, and we're grateful for you. You're sacrificing in COVID times from your family to do this. And every single one of, all 8 of you should be commended for stepping up. And Rick, thank you for your continued service. It does take a lot, and you're all to be commended. And if you have feedback for us, what worked and what didn't, we're always open to that. So for the next debate and for the next year or in 2 years, we can learn from what didn't work this time, what did. Hopefully we'll be back together again singing one day. And I'm looking forward to that day. And until then, remember, vote November 3rd. It's here almost. Your official sample ballots were already out. The most important, we can all agree on, everyone needs to vote, right?
Here, here.
Hands up.
Yay.
So thank you.
I should also like to congratulate the panelists, because having a conversation on Zoom is actually harder than when you're all together. But I think you guys pulled it off pretty much. And I think it worked pretty well. I hope you enjoyed it at least as much as a Q&A.
Thank you
I
very
certainly
much.
hope we're all together in 2 years, because if we're not all together in 2 years, we have much bigger problems than anything we've been talking about.
Yep. And let's just stay healthy, stay calm, stay strong. Together, we're going to be better tomorrow than we are today. And with all of you, with your ideas, I'm very confident that it is going to get better. And in 2 years, Bruce, we will be singing.
I'm going to go work on my song selections right now.
I'm going to go take singing lessons. Are you kidding?
Well, namaste, everybody. And Jane, Democratic Club, thank you so much for making this possible.
Thanks,
And
everybody.
the recording, if people want the recording, Jane, are you posting it somewhere?
Yeah, we'll post it on our website. I think if a candidate asks us, we'll get it to you somehow. If we can't email it, we'll upload it to some Dropbox or something where you can get it. And we usually send an email out afterwards indicating that people can go listen to it that weren't here. And beyond that, we've got a beautiful rest of the day for people who can get out and enjoy it.
Yeah, stay strong, everybody. I love all of your signs. They're beautiful. The artwork, Andy, one day that could be worth a lot of money. He's holding it up there. So thank you, everyone, and have a beautiful rest of the week. And thank you for the audience who's watching too. They're still on this. We have a lot of participants. So namaste, everybody. Stay
Namaste.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Bye.